Good morning, Mercy community. My name is John Charles, and I attend Mercy and volunteer as a small group leader and coach. For today's devotional challenge, we're going to take a look at a passage in Hebrews and then consider how to draw inspiration from other historical examples of faith. Hebrews 11 is an iconic passage in Scripture highlighting the exhibition of faith through historical figures of the Bible. One of those figures is Abraham, the ancestral father of the Israelites. Verses 8 through 12 read, By faith Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And by faith even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and as countless as the sand on the seashore. Looking at Abraham's story, there are three key parts highlighted from his faith journey. Abraham listened, he acted in obedience, and he looked forward. Abraham's faith is in conjunction with listening and hearing what God has for his life. From his listening, he takes the risk of obedience, exchanging his present surroundings for new and foreign lands. In this new land, he held on to the promise of a new life with God as the architect and builder. These points summarize his journey, but remember, his faith journey was neither easy nor immediate. He traveled for many years. He faced the pains of infertility and had many disputes and problems within his own family and community. And yet, despite these troubles, his faith is credited as enabling him to see the blessings to come for generations much beyond his own life. Abraham's story is not unique to Christians over the centuries who faithfully followed God in the midst of adversity. Consider the story of Sir Thomas More in 16th century England. In faith, he held to his beliefs in the face of persecution and death, and while in prison wrote A Dialogue of Comfort Against Tribulation, a story of two people wrestling with faith in the midst of life's trials. In spite of his own peril, his writing serves as a guide for those struggling with faith in the midst of certain grief. Another example is Frederick Douglass, a former slave turned prominent abolitionist. In his own crisis of faith, wrestling with the horrors of racism and slavery, he serves as an inspiration of faith and virtue in the midst of sin and hatred. Instead of blaming God for his enslavement, he instead trusted that God would grant him the means of his deliverance. To this day, his work endures as an example of light in one of the darkest periods of American history. A more recent example is the life of Dorothy Day, a Catholic woman whose activism was enriched by her faith. Despite being arrested many times, she strove toward feeding both body and soul to all around her and advocated giving a voice to the voiceless. Her influence is still recognized across the country today, like in the Dorothy Day residence in St. Paul, which continues her mission of caring for and assisting homeless people in our community. All of these stories of faith and countless more demonstrate the resolute faith of our spiritual mothers and fathers. When they were confronted with an inordinate amount of adversity, they trusted God to see them through whatever adversity was surrounding them. Each example faced seemingly insurmountable oppression from the societies they lived in. Yet, like Abraham before them, they listened to what God had for them. They were obedient in faith with what they had at their disposal, and they looked forward to better and more just societies. We certainly have the shared adversity of a global pandemic today, and the injustices around us can feel stifling. Each and every one of us, in some way or another, is facing our own crises of faith. In our stress and worry, it's easy to fall into the lie that we're alone and no one sees us. But when we look to past faith leaders, both from the Bible and from history, we quickly learn that our troubles, while very real and difficult, are neither insurmountable nor isolated. We serve a God who is faithful and loves us. The God that Abraham prayed to is the same one who we serve now, and he loves us, even to this day. I encourage you to read and learn about these and many other heroes of faith. Consider the problems they faced, trials that are both intimate and personal, as well as systemic and public. How can we learn from their experiences and breathe the same air of faith? How can we harness the same spirit and presence of the living God that inspired and drove them? We can start by looking at the stars and seeing the same promises of relationship and faithfulness that precede us. I pray that this week God will enrich our faith lives by the examples of those before us. Thank you.